What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about 5 trade targets that you guys should be looking to add to your Dynasty rosters. We're going to have a nice mix here of win now options, also some younger players, and for whatever reason, I just think these guys are all a little bit mispriced. I think they're being a little bit underrated by the Dynasty community. If you guys have any fantasy questions, Dynasty trade questions, just drop them down below. I'll make sure to get back to you as soon as I can. But let's just dive right into it. We're going to start off at the quarterback position. And I'm going to be talking about Kyler Murray here. So he's currently valued as the quarterback 11. I don't think that QB 11 ranking is like the most egregious thing in the world. I'd have him a little bit higher, but it's just more of where he's going in startup drafts. I'm using keep trade cut for these values. Obviously not perfect, but probably close to the best we have here for Dynasty. So Kyler Murray is currently a late round 2 startup pick. And just in general, it is really tough to acquire elite upside quarterbacks for Dynasty, whether it's in a startup, or trying to make a trade for a guy. And so you typically either have to give up an absolute haul if you're trading for them, or you're trying to take a swing on a young rookie, right? You could get a high upside guy in a Jaden Daniels, a Drake May, but you're also taking on some risk that those guys could bust and they may not pan out. I feel like Kyler Murray is really the cutoff on the cheapest proven high upside quarterback that you're going to find. In 5 seasons in his NFL career, he's been the quarterback 11, 3, 4, 7, and 9 in points per game. He's still very young, the same age as Justin Herbert. He's younger than Lamar Jackson, younger than Joe Burrow, and in his second season back from a torn ACL, I think we should see his rushing production, take a little bit of a step up. So last year, he was a solid QB1 option, but I think he could have that high-end QB1 production heading into 2024. His weapons are also looking really nice, a nice young core around him. Drafted Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride was balling out to end the season last year, also had Trey Benson in the backfield. So in my personal rankings, I have Kyler Murray right behind Caleb Williams and Anthony Richardson. On keep trade cut, you have a guy like Jordan Love at the quarterback position who's valued higher. If I could trade my Jordan Love for your Kyler Murray, I would do that all day long. I would take Kyler straight up very, very easily. I would also take Kyler over guys at other positions like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Marvin Harrison Jr., Puka, Brees, Bijan. Like, I'd be taking him over all of those elite, options at the wide receiver, running back position. And in some leagues, in some situations, you might actually be able to get something added onto your side, the Kyler Murray side, because according to Keep Trade Cut, all those players are valued more than Kyler Murray. So I just think in a spot where it's so tough to get quarterbacks, this is obviously going to be for Superflex, in a spot where it can be really tough to get those guys, Kyler being at that price, I think is just a steal if you can go out and get him on your roster. Now, shifting over to my next trade target, it's going to be Christian Watson. He's currently valued as the wide receiver 42, and there's no doubt about it, injuries have really hurt Christian Watson through his first 2 seasons, specifically hamstring strains. That's really plagued him throughout his NFL career. He's already missed 11 games in 2 seasons. Looking back at his rookie year, 2022, he missed a few games early on, but then he really started to break out and put it together over the second half of the season. From week 10 to 15, he averaged 21.6 PPR points per game. Then he suffers a hip injury. Their production falls off. In 2023, people were really high on Watson. He flashed that upside the previous season. Now heading into, 2023, he looked like a great pick, a fringe wide receiver 2, in that like wide receiver 24 area. He ends up missing the first 3 games because he has a hamstring strain. Then he struggles when he gets back. He starts to, put it together in week 12. He goes 5 for 94 and a touchdown. Then week 13, stacks another solid game, 7 for 71 and 2 touchdowns. But then he leaves that game early and re-injures his hamstring. So I think you can make a case that a healthy Christian Watson is the wide receiver 1 for the Packers. I know Jaden Reed had a great rookie season, and it could be him. But when Christian Watson has been healthy, consistently on the field, the dude can produce. He's a great athlete. He's a high upside player. Still only 25 years old. So this is a spot where maybe injuries plague him and he never reaches his full potential. But at a wide receiver 42 price tag, I'm a big believer in this Packers offense. If I'm just, taking a risk on him staying healthy, that's a risk I'm willing to take because I do think he has that serious upside there. Potential wide receiver 1, for Jordan Love on this Packers offense. Now, sticking around at the wide receiver position, just after Christian Watson, we have Chris Godwin here as the wide receiver 44. And I think this is a great dynasty buy window here for Chris Godwin. There's no doubt about it. He was underwhelming last season, 12.3 PPR points per game. The wide receiver 34, like back in wide receiver 3, that's not terrible. That was kind of where he was getting drafted. but it was the contrast between Chris Godwin and Mike Evans where it kind of seemed like they were in the same boat. They were going in a similar range in drafts, at least in terms of redraft. But Evans ends up averaging 16.6 points per game and is the wide receiver 10. So then we're looking at Chris Godwin like, what the heck happened here? Why did Mike Evans just completely outproduce you? I really expect the gap between those two to close pretty massively heading into 2024. From 2019 to 2022, Chris Godwin played at least 50% of his snaps from the slot. He played that big slot role here for the Bucs. In 2023, Dave Canales steps in as the offensive coordinator. He moves Chris Godwin primarily outside. Only 24% of his snaps were out of the slot. And then his production fell, like we saw, wide receiver 34 in points per game. When Godwin was playing that big slot role, him and Evans were always super, super close in their point per game finishes and how they ranked at the wide receiver position. So going back to 2019, Chris Godwin was the wide receiver 2, Mike Evans was the wide receiver 5. 2020, Godwin, wide receiver 15, Evans, wide receiver 16. 2021, Evans, wide receiver 10, Godwin, wide receiver 7. 2022, Godwin, wide receiver 15, Evans, wide receiver 13. So very, very competitive. They were putting up very, very similar production. Dave Canales is gone. He's the Panthers' new head coach. Their new offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, has already talked about moving Chris Godwin back into that slot. Talked about how he was kind of, not playing his natural position last year. Cohen's coming from the Rams. He mentioned specifically that Godwin would kind of play that Cup role. Now, I'm not saying Godwin's going to come in and put up Cooper Cup numbers, but I think when you move Chris Godwin back into the position where he found a lot of success, I think he's going to see a lot of increase in his production this year. He's 28 years old, so it's not like he's falling off a cliff. And I think we also have to remember that in 2022, he was coming off a torn ACL and was still the wide receiver 15 in points per game. So it's not like this is an injury thing. The second year removed from the ACL, you shouldn't be worse. So I really do think it was the role he was playing in. Like I said, 2 years before he's 30. I think he has a lot of solid seasons left here. And if you're going to be able to get him, at mid-tier wide receiver 4 price tag, I think that's a very fair price to pay. Now, shifting over to the next player, it's going to be Justin Fields, and he's currently ranked as the quarterback 28. And I think Fields is a really interesting option for rebuilding teams. Obviously, if you're win now, you probably don't want to bank on him, giving you really impressive production this season, especially over a long stretch. But I think if you're rebuilding, you want to buy low on him, I think it makes sense. Because I truly do believe that as long as Justin Fields touches the field within the next couple of seasons, I think he's going to increase in value from what he's at now. I don't think there's any guarantee that Justin Fields is going to get like another legit starting opportunity. Me wanting to buy low on him isn't me thinking like, I'm 100% confident Justin Fields is going to get another starting job. He's going to be locked in, future quarterback one for a team. Like, that's not how I'm looking at this situation. Is it possible? Sure. But, that's not my expectation. I don't even think you have to believe that he's going to be a long-term starter by trading low for him, because I really think he just needs to give you a few solid fantasy games, and people are going to get really excited. They're going to want to buy in on him. After the 2022 season, Fields hadn't exactly proved that he was going to be like the Bears' long-term starter. Obviously, there were some signs, they traded the number 1 pick. They were going back to him as the QB1, but it's not like he had been extended. And production-wise, it's not like he was giving you, franchise quarterback numbers out there. And he was still the quarterback 8 on Keep Trade Cut. So people were viewing him as like this long-term, locked-in, high-upside quarterback play. His rushing production just gives you such a crazy ceiling for fantasy football. And even this offseason, I'm a Bears fan. I wanted Caleb Williams. There were lots of fans, not just Bears fans, who wanted the Bears to stick with Justin Fields. They thought it was stupid to go draft Caleb Williams. From my perspective, that was crazy. But there are a lot of people out there who really do like Justin Fields and are big believers in him. So looking at his situation here for the 2024 season, I definitely don't think Russell Wilson has this starting spot completely locked up. He could get injured. He could get benched. As soon as Russell Wilson is not playing and you have Justin Fields out there, all he needs to do is rip off a 40, 50, 60-yard touchdown run, and I think you're already flipping a profit on where he's currently ranked. And then if he does end up securing a long-term starter spot, you're getting a potential Dynasty quarterback 1 at a current QB3 price tag. So I think it makes sense here. You're not going to obviously like mortgage your team trying to, make a move for him. He doesn't cost a whole lot, but I think it's just a risk you could go out there and take. You could flip him as soon as he steps on the field, or, hold out for some of that crazy upside. But I think it could make sense, especially if you're in a rebuilding situation. Like if I'm a rebuilding team, I'd much rather take a swing on Justin Fields than like one of these veteran quarterbacks who may only be starting for like a year or two more. So that's my take there. And then my final trade target here is going to be Isaiah Likely. And I just think Likely's in a very unique situation here at the tight end position. Given the lack of high upside tight ends, in the fantasy landscape, it's typically very tough to acquire them. You're obviously going to have to, spend a top pick in rookie drafts to get one of them. Or if you're going to try to trade, it's typically pretty difficult. But Likely is kind of like the only real handcuff tight end in the NFL. We use the term handcuff for running backs. If the starter goes down, the backup comes in, gets a lot of the same opportunities. That term typically doesn't apply to wide receivers or tight ends because you need to earn those targets, and most specifically at the tight end position because there are not, 32 tight ends that we trust for fantasy football. So if one goes down, typically the backup is just completely useless. But not with Isaiah Likely, because when Mark Andrews goes down and is out and Likely gets relevant snaps, he becomes a weekly strong tight end one play. These are Likely's PPR points in games where he's had a 70+% raw participation. 19.7, 9.4, 18.3, 0, 8, 19.3, 18, 8.6, 18.2, 11.4, and 3.6. That's 12.2 PPR points per game. He's only 24 years old. And then we're looking at this spot, right, where he's probably more of a long-term play because he has 2 years left on his rookie deal. Mark Andrews also has 2 years left, but there are definitely routes where he could end up getting a starting job. Like for the next 2 years, you probably have a handcuffed tight end, but maybe, the Ravens opt to let Mark Andrews walk in free agency. They re-sign Isaiah Likely. Maybe they re-sign Mark Andrews, but then another team goes out and they bring in Isaiah Likely. I think there are some spots where he lands a tight end one spot, gets a starting job, and then is very productive for fantasy football. But I just think at the tight end position, it's so rare to find a tight end who can clearly produce where you can still buy low on them because they don't have the opportunity. Like that situation really just doesn't exist. So if you're a rebuilding team, you don't need production right now, I would definitely take a swing on Isaiah Likely, and I would take it over more like win now options like a Dallas Goedert, a Dalton Schultz. Some people may not agree with that, but if you're not trying to win, give me a swing on a guy who's proven he's productive, still very young, over dudes who really aren't going to be difference makers in your lineup. So those are going to be my 5 dynasty trade targets here. We had Kyler Murray, Christian Watson, Chris Godwin, Justin Fields, and Isaiah Likely. If you guys have any trades, drop them down below. I'll give you my feedback. I'll also be talking about 5 sells coming out tomorrow. So stay tuned for that one. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.